Greetings residents, Professor Prinny here, and today I'll be recounting my 5-hour return to Genshin Impact after not having played the game for 4 to 5 years. For reference, I've played Genshin during its second closed beta test, there's footage of that period somewhere on this channel, and I played during the game's launch, all the way up to the Dragonspine area's release. Then I quit, burnt out from the daily grind, and simply, I was not having fun at that point. As for why I've returned, a friend asked if I could assist a mutual acquaintance that had started playing Genshin in the last week or so, adding on the caveats that this is their first gacha game, and that they're the insanely lucky kind of player, with, and I quote, Genshin-wise, they pulled Nefer and Farina in very few pulls. I've been so far removed from Genshin that all I could say to that was, cool. So if anyone wants to tell me if they're actually good or bad, let me know in the comments. So we arranged a day to play, hopped onto a Discord call, and just as I was loading into the game, I had the idea to record this session and make this video. So as I was trying to load up OBS, a bunch of notifications were auto-playing, and by the time I hit record and returned to the game, Venti was slowly freezing to death. During my panic, trying to get him to move in my controller, I realised that I had to change the settings, so I sorted that out and got myself reacquainted with the menu controls, scrounging up what Primo Gems, the game's premium currency, there were in the mail, and the achievements menu. For the most part, I thought we'd be doing co-op, but we couldn't do it as we were playing on different servers, so we screen shared each other's sessions instead. I got Venti warmed up before he died, before getting overwhelmed by the ridiculous amount of menus that reinforced to me that I shouldn't play this game seriously anymore. With what little scraps Hoyo gave this returning player, I had enough currency to make a 10 pull on this Arlecchino banner, and got Yume Mizuki, and Rosaria. Finally, after all these years, damn, filling up my outdated roster. More menu tortures later, beaten by the number of available quests and ongoing events, I thought to continue where I left off in the story instead of incapacitating myself with decision paralysis. Returning to Liyue, I listened to Ningguang mentioning something about rebuilding the Jade's Chamber, and a few seconds in, I note how the character models really showed their age, and because I didn't remember what was going on, I lost interest in the dialogue and started mashing through the text after quickly noticing there's no skip button in this game after 5 years. I still followed the story a bit more, getting stopped by Madam Ping mentioning something about a teapot which I had no recollection of, and meeting Yan Fei. We also helped this lady deal with some information peddlers and getting her dinner over at the medicine pavilion before my brain stopped processing what was going on, and I ditched the story, changing my focus to exploring the world. I didn't have a specific destination at this point, so I went westward with my old team, Aether, Venti, Xiangling, and Beidou. We stumble upon this villager-infested mine, so I decide to refamiliarize myself with combat. Suffice to say, I was getting my ass handed to me, especially against this Pyro Abyss mage, so I retreated with only Xiangling alive before stumbling into the chasm, where I'm slowly getting invested again now that I'm in unfamiliar territory. I get confused with this geo-element puzzle nearby, which requires the pillars to be hit in quick succession or simultaneously, and at this point, I got reminded by my acquaintance to revive my characters with eggs, and thankfully I had a decent supply. With a bit of brute forcing, I accidentally complete the geo puzzle and carried my confusion towards the visible Statue of the Seven in the distance. Afterwards, I circled the pit just to activate the waypoints, eventually finding the intended entrance 3/4 of the way around the loop. As for the last quarter, I accidentally get Xiangling killed by plummeting her off a cliff with 0 stamina, and near the crash zone was this geo-puzzle that's similar to the one I mentioned earlier, but this time I understood the main mechanism revolved around this resonating pillar that sends a geo-shockwave that activates other geo-related interactables, which is why I was able to complete the puzzle where I entered the chasm from, which is great because I thought you were supposed to use a geo-element character that could hit all the pillars at the same time. At the 1 hour mark, I had completed the chasm loop, continued my journey to the west, entering the Sumeru region. I get taught about the 4-leaf sigils, which are points you can grapple towards, and they made travelling through this region enjoyable. I liked going through the nature-dense environment, admiring the treetop architecture, and clearing out enemy camps as I was getting used to the controls again. Notably, I encountered this one bandit stronghold where we had to collect some keys to deactivate an extractor device on the roof, which we had to defend against a few waves of enemies. What I didn't realise was that there was a time limit, and I wouldn't have noticed if there wasn't an enemy that got themselves stuck on the lower floor, which stalled the deactivation process. Thanks to that, I only had a minute left to defeat the last wave, which I managed to do so, but because they kept me occupied over at the cliff below, I didn't have time to run back to the device and complete the deactivation process, causing me to start over. Thankfully, the second attempt went smoothly with less enemies getting blasted off the roof edge and wasting time. Around the 1 hour 40 minute mark, we enter the desert, and my acquaintance was telling me how this area is big, as well as talked about their experience of their friends trying to get them to follow the story instead of running off to the nation of Nodcry, which influenced my decision to journey to the northwest section of the map, not knowing at the time that that's where Nodcry is located. There's also more distinct looking enemies compared to what I've experienced years ago, like with these fungi here or these primal constructs, neither of which gave me too much trouble. We traverse over this ruined chasm, utilising the 4-leaf sigils, encountering and demolishing this ruined drake along the way, which I thought looked cool, and honestly, this area is pretty lackluster. I know this is a desert and all, but... oh, hang on, is that an inverted pyramid? Okay, finally, I really wanted this area over and done with, but that hourglass-looking pyramid was interesting enough for me to take a detour. But before that, I swapped Aether's element from Geo to Dendro at the closest statue of the 7 to see if it did anything special, and it didn't from what I noticed through this 5-hour session. Though it did help with activating switches and mechanics that needed that element, as I didn't have any Dendro characters as they weren't a thing back in the day. Once I got to the hourglass-shaped pyramid, I met with numerous invisible walls, floors and ceilings that barred the area, as well as switches that needed enough clearance to activate. Saddened by not being able to explore the pyramid, I continue heading towards the gap bridging the desert and the next region, encountering a fun little invisible maze along the way which even my acquaintance has not seen yet, and then pushed onto the next region. After a bit of a stroll, we get teleported out of nowhere to a completely different location and had to help out this weird armadillo creature beat the crap out of its enemies. Once we did that, we get introduced to the main gimmick of the region by taking control of the armadillo's body. We help break free its baby and get to name the little guy, and I named him Buddy. Buddy leads us out of this domain, and at the 2 hour 3 minute mark, we're officially in the Natsland region. I traverse through the valley in front of us and enter a graffiti-filled village, where I was mostly impressed by the music and the fact that there was an alpaca here, before I skipped town and took over the body of another armadillo, which I was able to use to enter this molten point and scale the valley wall that led me to another statue of the 7. Once I turned around, I was greeted with this picturesque, absolute cinema landscape shot, and I was just blown away by how impeccable the art direction is for this region. Everywhere I looked, this place looked like a painting I could frame. I'm just gobsmacked by how much of a step up Natsland is visually compared to the other regions I've visited or revisited thus far. After admiring the view for a minute or two, we descend down and make our way towards the next statue of the 7. I took more small detours than usual because eventually I'll have to move on from this region and I wanted to savour the beauty of this area, as my next goal was to head towards the north. Along the way we encounter an NPC that wants my attention, but I was only there for the waypoint and I didn't want to mash through more dialogue, so I skedaddled the moment the waypoint activated. Almost got stomped on by a dinosaur too, but we got a treasure chest out of it. Afterwards, I burned this gathering of carbuncle-looking creatures and found that we can take over their bodies too. These critters can double jump, as well as grapple, just like with the 4-leaf sigils back in Sumeru. The best part about this green critter's grapple though, is that you can chain it twice, and you don't even need a sigil to do it. Following that, I ruined this family of alpacas' day before reaching Natsland's capital, the Stadium of the Sacred Flame. Aside from getting lost looking for the shops, I talked to Catherine at the Adventurers Guild reception and got a new Adventurers Guild notebook that I don't even bother looking into before climbing back over the city walls towards the next statue of the Seven around the 3-hour mark. This time we find a bat that we can take over, who has the ability to copy a graffiti object and place a physical version of it, even this freaking hot air balloon that was near this statue of the Seven. This got us to a high vantage point, which we glided from using the bat's body, and thankfully it doesn't use stamina. Unfortunately, we landed at a much lower elevation than I would have liked, but these tall cliff faces weren't going to scare me since I knew I had more than enough stamina to get to the top if I take it slow. Near the next statue of the Seven is the last creature we were able to take over this session, this magnificent Phoenix Flamingo hybrid, which can fly and gain height as long as we have the Natsland region's unique energy to spare. Using this form, we take a detour towards the east and find ourselves in this village of hot air balloons, which we use as a jumping off point to traverse as far as we can over the chain of narrow mountain paths to the north. As we land, we follow the central path and are greeted with a dragon's bombardment, which didn't faze me. We say goodbye to bright and beautiful and hello to dark and dreary. The statue of the Seven here is locked behind this door, but thankfully we can use the Phoenix Flamingo transformation to enter an opening from above, which only led us to being attacked by the dragon via cutscene this time. There's some more story I mashed through and I activated the statue, exiting the tower through the only gap to the northwest and encounter these void-like enemies, which we can't actually damage until we break their void shield. If you don't beat them fast enough, they do get the void shield back, and then we just rinse and repeat the smackdown. It's less interesting and more of an annoying hindrance if anything. Nonetheless, I explore the area, trying to figure out how to get into this nearby building as there's a waypoint inside. After circling around, I find the intended entrance, unknowingly and unintentionally continuing the story of this place, and we're stuck in this building until we find another way out. We use the bat's abilities to solve the puzzles in the building, mostly using cubes to hold up doors so we can squeeze under before encountering this lady and her squishy sidekick, which we'll use to purify some blights that are keeping various items locked up, by putting them within the light aura emitted from the squishy sidekick. Since I was this deep into the story quest for this area, I continued to follow it, collecting these feather-shaped source scraps while also avoiding the dragon's wrath. Once we get the last source scrap, we enter this lackluster shooting showdown between our squishy sidekick and the dragon, eventually grounding the latter so we fight it normally, slowly whittling the void armor, face tanking most of the dragon's attacks before we quickly shred through the HP bar and scare it away. Once that was done, I was satisfied with stopping the story there and continuing my journey north, following the path of waypoints on the minimap, eventually reaching Land's End, where I then decide to climb up the nearby tower as I plan to glide over the ocean to the next nation. There's this upward draft at the top, which would make you think that you could use it to gain extra height, but nope, it's just an illusion. At this point, my acquaintance had stopped playing the Genshin TCG for the day as it was 1 PM where they were from, and thus I continued on by my lonesome. I stand at the edge of the tower, looking towards the horizon with fog obscuring my vision. I check the map, realize in the back of my mind that there might be too much ocean to glide over from our vantage point. Regardless, my brother entered the room and interjected to remind me of the 2 Animo Element character party bonus and stamina cost reduction foods, so I was feeling a bit more optimistic about this glide attempt. I ate a meal that reduced stamina consumption for gliding, and added Jean to the party.
We may leave at any time.
With preparations complete, I used the charged version of Venti's elemental skill to get some extra height and set off. Stamina-wise, it looked like we were going to be okay, but just beneath our feet, I saw the ocean ripples through the fog, with the silhouette of the next nation still being way out of reach, confirming to me that we were not gliding the whole way, touching down in the ocean at exactly the 4-hour mark. I tried to swim the rest of the distance, but the stamina consumption was too much and we couldn't even make it to the border. Thus, we drowned. This time I used a more primitive method to cross the sea, bringing out my level 3 Kaya to slowly ice bridge us over to the other side from Natsland's northernmost point, spamming his elemental skill over and over for 20 minutes towards the nearest statue, before arriving in the lunar land of Nodcry. I immediately activate the nearby statue of the new moon so we never have to traverse the ocean to Nodcry again, and I cement my final goal of activating the other 2 statues in this nation. On our way towards the second one, I encounter my first puzzle here. We take the nearby blue wisp, and initially, I thought we just had to match the colours, and I kept trying to activate the blue wave on this monument, which did nothing. So after a few futile attempts, I interacted with the red wave instead, and that pulled the statue towards us along the rail. Thanks to that, I quickly understood that the laws of magnetism was going to be one of this land's themes. Getting back on track, we hop on over to the next island, and encounter a blooming aura of darkness, with an NPC fighting off some enemies which Paimon refers to as the Wild Hunt. So we help the NPC despite the fact he's dealing more damage than us, and has a cooler moveset, launching sword beams and having this amazing AoE multi-slash attack, which left me wondering why this guy is an NPC because I want him in my party. Alas, it's not meant to be, as once we finish this wild hunt, we pick up a bell-shaped item and the mysterious NPC just disappears. Juxtaposing the gloomy atmosphere of that wild hunt, we enter a more jolly area with this vibrant scrapyard facility, which reminds me of an aesthetic from another game or movie, but I just can't seem to pinpoint it. Regardless, I don't dwell on it for too long and enter a nearby cave, only to hit a dead end with no currently active interactables. But while here, I did figure out we can transform into the wisp we saw at the first puzzle we found, allowing us to move faster. Exiting the cave, we go around instead and find another puzzle type where we activate these cube bots, bring them to a specified location, and collect our reward. Further along, we encounter this platform with 2 cube bots in front of some pedestals, and as I was trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do, an NPC rudely teleports us away to deal with her Weasel Cannon hijacking problem, reminding me of the Monty Mole cannon encounters in Super Mario Sunshine. So we weave our way through the cannon's homing projectiles, getting close enough to disable it. After that forced detour, I just weaved my way through the hills until we found the path that led to the next statue within Nashua Town. I don't spend too much time exploring the place. At the very least, I got myself to the peak of one of the buildings and briefly take in the scenery, feeling impressed by the aerial container lanes and the apex buildings floating on magnetism alone. I escape from town over the walls and head through the last stretch of this journey, encountering enemies that gave me trouble like this rhino or this goat enemy. Screw that goat in particular, I actually had to use food to heal mid-combat because of how surprisingly hard it hit, and how difficult it was to dodge its charge since it tracked my position so well. Further along, we glide down this chasm with some floating containers to get the waypoint below, and thankfully there was an elevator that we could use to get back up. This led us into a stormy plains area, and we dash our way through while avoiding the lightning bolts, until we reach a cliff edge overlooking the final destination of this journey. We glide, enter one last cutscene with some military-looking personnel cornering another NPC, and I just burst them all down with Venti's ultimate paired with Xiangling's, allowing us to activate the last statue of the new moon before I ended my session. And that was my 5-hour return to Genshin Impact. I was supposed to be assisting my acquaintance, but they assisted me more than anything. It's a shame we couldn't co-op, but I still had a surprisingly enjoyable time, chatting, revisiting the world, admiring the sights, especially Natsland's, like an actual traveller. Will I return? Probably not, unless I'm dragged back in by my friends, and there are too many gacha games that have my attention anyway. Well, that's it from me. Thank you everyone for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Take care of yourselves and have a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye!